Hey, you guys. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Y'all don't mind my hair. I gotta take these braids out. But I was supposed to do this this live a long time ago, but I just wasn't up for it. So, this live is going to be on standing for marriage, standing for restoration, right? And I titled it The Right Way to Stand because I do believe that there is a general disposition that you should be in when you're standing for marriage, right? So, the first thing that I want to say is I think a lot of times when you're standing for your spouse, you start to lose yourself in it. You start to identify yourself with only being a spouse, and you kind of forget that you are an individual. So a lot of times when we're standing, right, we're praying for the other person, we're praying for their protection and all that stuff. But when was the last time that you prayed for yourself? So when I was standing, the very first time that I ever found out what standing was, in the beginning, it was really hard, right? That was the same time that I got saved. But literally, I want to say a month into me being saved was when I started this relationship with God that was literally the greatest relationship I had ever been in my life. And I haven't been in many relationships, like literally I haven't, but I was so like literally in love with God that nothing else mattered. And with me being in love with God, I fell in love with myself. Like literally, that was the first time that I was posting pictures on my Instagram, not caring about what they look like, not caring if I had any makeup on, because I literally loved myself. Like it was the first time in my life I had ever woken up and I was just happy because I knew I was going to hear from God. Like it was like that. Like that's how happy I was to just know God. It had gotten to a point in my stand, right, at that time where I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about my husband, like talking to him. I haven't thought about talking to him or texting him in a long time. Is that normal? Like I was literally afraid that I was going to not want that anymore. And I remember telling God, like, okay, is that a bad thing? Like, that's how in love with God I was. I wasn't worried about anything else. I wasn't worried about my husband being around because I had God. And so, a lot of times when we start on our stand, it is literally because things are falling apart, but we never kind of backtrack into getting to know God and being in love with God and allowing God to be your husband. And so, in doing that, you lose yourself, right? And now your world is falling apart because your husband isn't around or your wife isn't around. And yeah, you go to God every once in a while to pray and to get direction and to get confirmation about, certain words and things. But when have you ever just gone to God just to be in his presence during this time? It's like the only thing that you can think of is your spouse and being married and being in love and not being alone and having someone to be there for you. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't want that because that's your husband, that's your wife. You should want the marriage, but you should be wanting God more than you want anything else, right? You should be wanting God more than you want your husband or your wife to text you and say, I love you. And I'm not saying that it's easy to want that when you're in pain, but that should be the goal. You should be striving to be so happy every single day just because you are in the presence of God that even if your spouse texted you something that hurt your feelings, it would not move you because you are with God. You know what God said. You have God on your side. You're not worried about all of those things. So I want to say that in all of that as well, you have to stop focusing on what the other person is doing, what they're saying, how they feel. It doesn't matter, right? Like you have to get to a place where they'll say something crazy and you're like, well, I know this is just the enemy, I'm going to pray. Like you have to, like, it is literally a choice, right? Because I feel like it's easy to make the choice to be sad and to stay in sadness and to stay in disappointment and to just be like, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do, like I don't want this anymore. It's easy to do that, but you have to make the choice to be like, I'm not going to allow this thing to consume me to the point where I'm not even praying for myself, to the point where I'm not even in the mood to go talk to God, because all I want is to talk to my wife or to talk to my husband. You know, if you don't get to that space, you start to try to take things into your own hands. You start to try to fix things on your own and figure things out on your own. Like, you cannot do that. So literally the right way to stand is to be so in love with God that nothing else moves you. To be so in love with God that you wake up and your first thought isn't sadness or disappointment, but it's literally, well, Lord, what were you gonna get into today? What are we talking about today? What's on your heart today? Right? Like, God has to be your spouse in the season of standing, because if he isn't your spouse, you will lean on your own understanding. And when you start to lean on your own understanding of things, that's when things get hard. That's when it's easy to stay weary. It's easy to get exhausted. It's easy to not want your marriage anymore. It's like, even though you want it so bad, you get to a point where standing for it has become so burdensome that it doesn't feel worth it anymore. When you get to that place of almost like hopelessness, where you're kind of like, I don't care anymore, like I will literally walk away from all of this, that's how you know that your focus has not been on the right thing. And that's not to say that you're not supposed to be praying for your spouse or for your marriage, right? Because you're supposed to be doing that all the time. But you allowed everything to consume you, and you kind of put God on the back burner a little bit. You go to God when you're feeling down, or you hear a prophetic word and you just need to confirm if it's for you or not. That shouldn't be the only times that you're going to God. You know, I feel like your identity cannot be wrapped up in the fact that you want to be a spouse, like you want your husband or your wife back. That's not who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you're a wife, yes, you're a husband. That is not all that you are. You know, like, there's so much more to it. When was the last time you asked God to show you what your individual purpose was outside of being a spouse? You know what I'm saying? Have you even thought about that? Have you put the time and the energy to pray over your calling, your own individual calling? Because let me be real with you, like, I don't feel like God has only called us to only be a spouse, to only be a husband or a wife, and that's your only calling. Like, I don't see that. I see it being deeper than that, you know? But when was the last time that you sought out God for your own calling? When was the last time that you did that? Let me be frank with you guys, because you know I'm always real. Your marriage right now may not be where you want it to be, but it's not the end of the world. And I say that because God already told you that he's going to put your marriage back together and fix it. There's no reason to act like things will never, ever, ever change. Like, it'll always be the same. Nothing will get better. Like, it's not even realistic to think like that when God is involved in something. And so you also have to remind yourself of that. Like, remember who God is, right? Remember who God called you to be. You cannot get so wrapped up in this stand that it's all you identify with, right? Like, all your whole purpose, your whole everything is, I'm going to stand for my marriage and that's it. Because then let me tell you this, you'll get into your marriage, right? And then you'll be sitting there, like, once that part of your life is done, you'll be sitting there like, okay, well, what's next? Now you're a wife, now you're a husband, and then you're like, okay, well, you were so caught up in all of that you don't even know what you need to do next in this marriage or for yourself. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh my gosh, y'all, there are ants in here. There's an ant in here. Sorry. I'm in the car and it looks like there's an ant or a spider. Is that a spider? Oh my God, that's a spider. Okay, hold on, y'all. I don't do spiders. Oh Lord, it didn't die. Oh my gosh. Ugh, it fell. Oh no, it's a no for me. Oh my God, and it's not dying. What in the world? Sorry, y'all. I'm sorry, y'all. There's a little spider and I do not like spiders. Oh my gosh. These are the wrong shoes. They need to be thinner so I can really get in there. I'm sorry, y'all. But yeah, like, I felt like I needed to do this, like, I feel like even though I've talked about it before, like, I know I've said these things before, like, out of all the lives all the lies that I've made about marriage and stuff, I always try to say the same things. But I see this one woman, right, in my Facebook group, and she struggles quite a bit. And I feel like, I don't know if she ever watches my YouTube videos, but it kind of inspired me too to say something, because I see that she gets so caught up sometimes in, you know, what her spouse says and the things that she, you know, the things that he does to her, and she gets so despondent, you know. It's like nothing else matters, like all she can see is the natural, you know. And you know, this walk, this stand, it has nothing to do with the natural. Like, if anything, it is all supernatural. And that's why, sorry y'all, oh my gosh, okay, and that's why when you talk to people about standing, they don't understand it, they don't agree with it, like, right? Because like the way the world is right now, forgiveness is not a thing. You know, oh, your spouse cheated on you, you just gotta leave. Like, there's no such thing as standing for a marriage anymore. Nobody believes in it. It's like everybody's expendable. And so when you're on this stand, you have to understand that you cannot look at things in the natural. It won't make any sense. It won't make any sense. So I just want y'all to understand, like, it's not the end of the world. Like, things will get better, but you need to take the time out for you, and, you know, fall in love with God. Allow God to love you. You know, like, I know sometimes you just want to hear from your spouse, and I love you. You know, you want the comfort of their hug, or, you know, and of course it's okay to want that, but because you can't have it right now, that's why you need to go to God and allow him to fill that void, and stop trying to get your spouse to fill that void. And also, it has a lot to do with insecurities as well, which is why I say you have to get to a place where you're so in love with God that those insecurities are non-existent anymore, and you're not basing your spouse's lack of empathy on you. Like, you're not taking it personally, you know what I'm saying? Because it's easy to take things personally, especially when you're in that space and you're looking at things from the natural, and you start to question, well, is it me? You know, like, maybe they're not attracted to me anymore, maybe they don't love me anymore, and that's not the case. Like, it never was, you know, never was the case. So falling in love with God, allowing him to be your husband, falling like even more in love with God, because I know we love God, right? But there's just a certain level of relationship that you need with God in order to get through standing for a marriage. Standing for something that is supernatural means that you need to be on a completely different level with God than you have ever been before. Because like I said, when I was in that space standing for my marriage, in the very beginning before I got saved, I was like that. I was depressed, and I was really sad, and I was literally like, I had no hope at all. But I got to a point where, like I said, like, it was all about God. Like, literally, it was like something just switched, and all I could see was God. All I cared about was God. I didn't care if I didn't hear from my husband. Like, I wasn't worried about that anymore. I was so just in love with myself and like being on this journey. And over time, the stand got easier. Being engulfed in God like that allowed for me to hear him more clearly. And I will say that when I wasn't focused on God, it was kind of like I was waiting for paint to dry, you know, like waiting. Okay, is he going to text me now? Is today going to be the day? Like, am I going to hear from him? Like, I was so focused on that when I wasn't engulfed in God. The minute that I became engulfed in God, it seemed like things started to happen effortlessly. You know, it was like I would get a text randomly or a FaceTime call, and I'm like, whoa, like, I was not expecting this, you know. And I really do believe it was because of my focus. And so your focus needs to be on God only, not on the natural, not on what you see, not on what you feel. And you have to be intentional about it. The way that you are intentionally standing and choosing to love your husband or your wife, or standing for your marriage, is the way that you need to intentionally choose to love God and go to God and focus on him and allow him to be your everything in this season. Everything that you're not getting from your spouse, you can get from God, but even better and even more, right? I think that we forget that our spouse's love isn't the greatest love. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, even if your spouse is loving you the way God loves you, it will never be exactly the way that God loves you. It will never be the amount of love that God has for you. Everything that you want from them, you can get from God. So go to God for it. If you cannot get it out of them, you go to God. And like I said, I'm not saying that it's easy, because I don't want people to think that like I'm saying it like it's supposed to be easy. I know it's easier said than done, but it is a choice. Like I said, you have to make the choice. So I hope that this is encouraging, right? Like I want you guys to understand, like, you are more than just a spouse. It's not just about standing for your marriage. It's not just about being able to say that your marriage was restored or that you're married at all. It's more than that. It's deeper than that. Right, exactly. When you focus on God, you're able to see things the way that He sees them. When you have that godly vision, the godly clarity, that's when you're able to take a step back and look at things as a whole. When you're not focused on God, you're only seeing what's right in front of you. You know what I'm saying? You're only seeing what's in the natural. And then you start to get discouraged, because you're like, well, God, you said it was going to be like this, but it looks like this. Right? So there is a right way to stand, and that is to take your focus off of your spouse. Like, you literally have to. You have no other choice. And I don't mean to stop praying for them, but stop acting like all God has called you to do is to stand for this marriage, or to, stand in the gap for whoever it is. But that's not all He called you to do. Like, He's taking care of the big things, right? Like, He's taking care of the bulk of it. All you have to do is make sure your focus is right. Make sure your faith is in the right place. Like, that's literally the basis of it. That is what you have to do.